And I'm joined by Susan Abulhawa. She's an internationally renowned and award-winning Palestinian author and poet. She joined me, I recall, almost a year ago, and that had gone viral, Miss Abulhawa. So thank you very much for joining me from London at the moment. Would you concede, Susan Abulhawa, at the very outset, a year after October 7, the roots of what has happened since then, the war in the Middle East, lie in what happened on October 7, 2023, the terror attack by Hamas on innocent Israeli civilians?
No, I don't concede that. That's not the root cause in any way. Just like the root cause of the mass lynchings of enslaved people was not because Nat Turner rebelled. The October 7th was a Palestinian revolt. It was a rebellion. It was primarily a military operation that targeted Israeli soldiers. Mm-hmm. To date, we actually don't know what happened on October 7th because there has not been an investigation. But what we do know is that 28 Israeli Apache helicopters emptied all of their rounds, all of their munitions on that day, and killing at least hundreds of their own citizens, according to Israeli media, according to Haaretz, and reloaded at least once. The firepower of those Apache helicopters is responsible for the scorched, for the burning, for all the burned cars and all the burned homes. We know that for a fact as well. We also know that Israel made up spectacular lies, all of which were debunked completely, from beheaded babies, from gutted pregnant mothers, burned babies, the ovens, all these, the mass rape. All of these have been debunked lies. So these are the facts that we know.
No, Miss Abulhawa,
until somebody can until there is an investigation.
Miss Abulhawa, I'm sorry that I'm interrupting you, because there are those who are going to listen to you saying you're simply not accepting the reality of what happened on October 7th, 2023, and not condemning it unequivocally. The fact is, innocent Israelis died on October 7th. The truth of the matter is that this was a terror attack by Hamas. You come today and call it a military operation, which was a terror attack on civilians. And over 100 Israelis, even now as we speak, are still held hostage and still with Hamas, ma'am.
There are literally 9,600 Palestinian hostages in Israeli prisons. Not a single one of them has been charged with a crime or has stood trial. And they, in fact, are in torture camps. And what B'Tselem has described as hell on earth, they are being raped systematically. And we know this because now Israeli soldiers have admitted it. And you still insist on making us out to be the terrorists. It is extraordinary. The way you lie, the way the media lies to the people is extraordinary. We are witnessing the Holocaust of our time, and you still want to begin the clock on October 7th. We have been slaughtered for 75 years, Rajdeep. No. I will not allow you to start the clock.
Ma'am,
stop. No, you will not. You will not start the clock. You will not start the clock on October 7th, and you will not call us terrorists, because we are a people who are fighting for our survival. We are being wiped off the map. We have been brutalized for 75 years. The 1,200, we have been killed in far greater numbers consistently and continuously for 75 years. But you don't take notice. You don't report it because our lives don't matter.
No, that's not true, Susan. I am very clear. Every life matters, whether Israeli or Palestinian, or any innocent life who's subject to a terror attack. I'm asking you to tell me how you see October 7 now in hindsight a year later, given that this targeted attack in Israel has now led to thousands of Palestinians being killed in Gaza and beyond, and now we are seeing it in Beirut as well. Put it in some context for us now.
What I said is that the clock did not stop start on October 7th, and I will not allow any framing to suggest that it did, when we have been slaughtered in far greater numbers, continuously, uninterruptedly, for 75 years. We have been slaughtered. We have pressed. Our homes are demolished regularly. We are humiliated on a daily basis. Our farms, our livelihoods are taken away. Our water is sucked out from underneath us, given to Israelis just nearly free, and sold back to us at exorbitant prices. We go thirsty while they swim in swimming pools. We have roads that we cannot go down because they are for Jews only. This is an extraordinary reality that has existed in the 21st century. It is a medieval anachronism that continues to persist in the world. And you still want to call us the terrorists because we dare to resist? I will not allow you to frame it that way. It is dishonest, and your viewers
Susan
deserve
Abulhawa,
to see the reality of what's happening and what has happened to us.
Ma'am, you use the word resistance more than once. Distinguish for me and for my audience what you call resistance and what they will see as terrorism, because it's not just them. The world saw what happened on October 7, 2023 as an unprovoked terror attack. You're saying it was a part of resistance going back in time over decades. But the fact is, as a result, close to 40,000 innocent Palestinians have also died in what followed. And therefore, one wonders, where will all of this end, ma'am? Where will this end, Susan Abulhawa, if there is so much of anger on both sides?
It's just the West and colonial mindsets like the India Times, who describe it as terrorism. As a matter of fact, the vast majority of the global South does not consider it terrorism, and they see it for what it is. Now, here's the thing: do you know who Nat Turner is?
No, tell me.
Nat Turner was an enslaved African in the United States. He led a revolt of enslaved people in the United States, and he had lived his entire life as a slave to white plantation owners. And when they revolted, they went into the big house and they killed everybody. They killed the men and the women and the children. They killed everybody. Now, I can have compassion, true compassion, for the women and children who were killed in the big house on the plantation. But I will always, always root for Nat Turner and the people with him, because I know who the true victims are. Now, while I can have compassion for people who were killed on that day, I will always root for people who have lived under Israel's boot for so long, Susan, to fight back in whatever way they can. Now, by virtue of age, every single person at that Nova Festival was either an active duty or a reservist in the military. So you can consider them civil if you want.
That's
but the
not
fact
true.
is, they are actually part of the military. I'm not saying they deserve to be killed. I'm not saying that. But to pretend that they are just these innocent victims who came out, they are colonizers. They are colonizers who are having a party outside of a concentration camp where people cannot leave, where people whose dietary intake is controlled by Israel, whose electricity, whose water is controlled and denied. So, and these are also the people who go on the hilltops and used to watch every time and eat popcorn like it's a movie every time Israel would bomb Gaza. So let's not pretend that these kibbutzes on the outskirts of Gaza were anything but colonies populated by foreign colonizers. And the people in Gaza are actually the original inhabitants of those villages.
Susan,
so you have to provide that context as well.
Okay, I'm happy to provide the context as you see it, but we can agree to disagree, therefore, on what happened exactly a year ago this day. Let me talk about today, October 7, 2024. What are we seeing? Large parts of Gaza continue to be bombed. Palestinians claim more than 41,000 people have been killed. The world is seeing the catastrophe unfolding that could now take in Beirut, it could take in Iran possibly. Offer me therefore a solution now that goes beyond the stated positions of Israel and Palestine, a solution that would end this war and the bloodletting.
This war could have ended on October the 9th. Hamas literally told Israel that they would return all the hostages in exchange for Palestinian hostages. It could have ended. And there were multiple agreements where Hamas agreed to complete cessation of hostilities, return of all the hostages in exchange for ending the bombing campaign and return of Palestinians. That's it. It could have ended, but Israel doesn't want to end it. And you have to, and again, you know, it's extraordinary the way you frame things, even like talking about the dead and injured as Palestinians claims. That is actually a significant underestimation, actually. Every single one of those names has been confirmed, have been announced, their ages and their ID numbers. So it's not a claim. It's actually an underestimation. There are at least, by most estimates, at least 350,000 people murdered in the span of 1 year. So, you know, and now Israel is bombing Lebanon, and we all know why, and they're telling us why. They're telling us why they want to expand because they think this is God promised them. There was literally a headline in the Jerusalem Post, which they've since deleted, that says, basically suggesting that Lebanon is part of God's promised land for them. That 3,000 years ago now it's theirs, and they're announcing they're announcing new villages. They're literally selling real estate in Lebanon. This is their goal. It's an expansionist.
Israel has been bombed by the Hezbollah from Lebanon.
It's so sad, and I've said this to you before, Rajdeep, that India does not recognize colonizers anymore. I don't know what happened to you. It hurts my heart. It really hurts my heart to see what India has become. It really does. You don't recognize colonizers. You don't recognize the victims.
You're saying you're the victims and Israel are the colonizers. Just to say, India's official stand has been that the hostilities must end at the earliest. That's the stand India has taken. I ask you again, therefore, given what has happened in the last 1 year, do you see any light at the end of the tunnel, Susan?
Now, okay, I'll answer that, but you have to acknowledge first that one side has agreed, whether it's Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iran, Hamas, every single one of them has agreed to lay down their arms if Israel would stop. But there's only one side that's refusing to stop. No, and you must acknowledge that.
What both sides have their narratives on who's willing to end the war, but Israel says return of the 102 hostages held by Hamas is a precondition almost for any kind of ceasefire. The first step must be the return of the hostages who were taken in on exactly a year ago. Do you accept that that's where you start? Is that the first step to be taken? Isn't that the acceptable way forward?
No, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. You know, there was an agreement. There was a Security Council resolution. It's a binding resolution from the Security Council that lays out the terms, and Israel is the only party that has defied that and rejected it. It's literally the only one. Everyone else has agreed to it. Everyone else has agreed to to an initial ceasefire that would allow for a progressive return of all of the hostages, including a withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. That was agreed to. Israel reneged, and Israel continued bombing because Israel does not want to stop bombing.
You're saying Israel does not want to stop bombing. Israel is a colonizer. It's the oppressor. You're the victims. Israel in turn says whatever they're doing even now is in pure self-defense. It's a sovereign country surrounded by hostile neighbors, well armed with terror groups, armed militias operating in each of these countries with impunity, directing and targeting Israel with bombs. Therefore, they say we are doing it in self-defense. Your response?
Oh, please. Of course they say that. Every single colonizer says that. Every colonizer who steals and rapes and murders systematically and will always say we're defending ourselves against the savages because they dare to fight back. Without exception, this is a very old script, and you should know it, Rajdeep. However, to that claim that they are in a bad neighborhood surrounded by hostile, I will tell you what the Jordanian foreign minister said to that. He said, I want to clarify something. Every single Arab country in the region, including Iran, every single one of them without a single exception has said since at least the year 2000, for 25 years and longer, have said we are willing to normalize economic and political and social and academic relationships with Israel and integrate them into the region. The only thing they ask is that Israel respect international law and end the occupation. That's it. So this idea that they are surrounded by these crazy hostile Arabs is just a bunch of racism. It's just a bunch of white supremacist nonsense that you, again, should recognize. It's the idea that all we want is just we sit around and then just think about how to kill Jews. This is nonsense. It is nonsense.
But Susan, none of what you're saying is going to actually, is going to actually give us a resolution. Do you see light at the end of the tunnel, or will things get worse, you fear, before they get better, given the animosities on both sides?
I'm not a psychic. I don't know what the future holds, but I can tell you what the immediate future holds, I should say. But in the long term, I can tell you that Israel will not exist in its current form. It will not exist because this kind of white supremacist, this overt apartheid system of multi-tiered laws and codified racism that privilege Jews at the expense of non-Jews, this endless sort of notion that God loves them more, that they are somehow, how many times have we seen this in history to know that this is not sustainable and this will not continue to thrive, and it should not be allowed to continue to thrive in the world. We need an equitable world. We need an end to this colonialism, this idea that some people are better than others. We need to live. Our planet is burning. We are destroying our vegetation, our animals, our wildlife, because this small group of people cannot get enough, because nothing is ever enough for this small group of people who have all the money, all the power. That's why we are in this. And at the center of this is Israel.
No, I'm going to ask you one last time, and there are those who will listen to you today and say, there's a lot of anger in what Susan is saying, lots of strong words being used, but the evidence on the ground suggests that there are simply no angels out there in this war. There have been war crimes committed on both sides. There have been terror attacks. There has been the killing of innocents. And therefore, the first step towards reconciliation, Susan Abulhawa, is acknowledging that this is the reality on the ground. You cannot live in denial that there has been hate, which has been led to violence on both sides of the divide.
No, I reject this two-sidism, and this is the problem why people like you keep framing it like it's two sides. Like there were two sides to slavery. Like there were two sides to British colonialism of India. Like there were two sides to apartheid South Africa. This is not two sides. This is a situation of colonialism, of enormous oppression and theft and degradation of one people at the hands of another people, while the colonized are fighting back. You have to make this clear to people, because it's dishonest otherwise. So that is the evidence. So you cannot say the evidence is otherwise. That is the evidence, and that's the truth. And that's the historic record.
Ma'am.
Now, the end to this will be an end to colonialism.
Okay.
And an end to this apartheid system. Palestinians and Arabs on the whole have already expressed a willingness to exist alongside Israel, but we will never accept them as our masters. And they can't seem to understand this.
Let me leave it there, Susan Abulhawa. You've spoken with great passion. whether that passion alone is enough to bridge a divide between people, then the fact is that thousands of people have died in the last 1 year, and there's no end at the moment to the war in West Asia. But for speaking to me and taking the time out, Susan Abulhawa, thank you very much for joining me on the show tonight.